Okay, so let me just see if I can get this. Okay, so I'm just going to be talking about some general mental health information. So I'm one of the therapists at Jewish Family Services, and so I just kind of wanted to make you aware of some facts. So mental health disorders are pretty common. So as you can see here, about a quarter of the population is diagnosed with a mental health disorder. And so this can be a range of different diagnoses, but some of the most common that we see are anxiety disorders, depression, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia. And these are just kind of a few examples. As you know, there can be kind of a few. Um, and so about 10 million people experience what we call co-occurring disorders. So what this means is when someone has more than one diagnosis. So maybe they have anxiety and depression, or maybe they have schizophrenia and anxiety disorder. So that's something that's pretty common. It can be kind of few and far between that we see just one diagnosis with individuals. And just some causes of mental health disorders. This is something that's still being studied, and there can really be a range of different causes. So some of them might include genetics, brain chemistry, trauma, things that happened, in childhood or in someone's past. But this is not an exhaustive list. These are really just a few different examples. But again, there could be multiple factors that go into someone's diagnosis. So some of the common ones, I thought it'd be good to kind of go over some of the signs and symptoms. So when we're thinking about depression, this is kind of going beyond someone just feeling sad and having a bad day, kind of being in a bad mood. So when we think about depression, there's kind of a range of severity that could happen. But for the most part, we're really looking for someone being in a low mood or sad mood for a period of time. So usually over 2 weeks. And where they just kind of can't seem to snap out of it. And it's not that easy to kind of, have a good day and kind of get back into the swing of things. So some of the symptoms might be loss of enjoyment in things. So someone who might have once enjoyed playing soccer, they no longer, it doesn't appeal to them anymore. So they don't want to play soccer anymore. Things like that. And it could be with anything. It could be hobbies, school, things that, you have to do. So generally, there would be some difficulty kind of completing daily activities, so doing chores around the house, things like that. Fatigue is really common. So someone might say that they just feel tired all the time and they don't really know why. Um, so with depression, we can see either difficulty sleeping, so difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep, or there can be sleeping too much. So someone might be sleeping all day, just kind of always tired, like they can't get enough sleep. Same thing with eating habits. It can be either eating too much or complete lack of appetite, where they're just kind of not hungry, so they don't want to eat. Having suicidal thoughts is really common with depression. Feelings of worthlessness, just kind of feeling not good enough. And another thing that's really common and important to look out for is irritability. So this is one of those that kind of can go unnoticed, because it might be kind of brushed off as, well, they're in a bad mood, they're grumpy, they're just not a nice person. But being irritable and kind of having that, what some people would describe as moodiness, is actually one of the more common signs of depression. So next, we're going to talk about anxiety. So this, again, is one of the most commonly diagnosed mental illnesses. So anxiety, again, goes beyond just worrying about something. So when we see anxiety, there's a few different technical disorders that fall under this, but generally what we see is someone who's has that prolonged worry. So they have physical, psychological, and behavioral symptoms that may or may not be visible to other people. So some of the physical signs are like heart racing, just kind of feeling shortness of breath. A lot of people say that they kind of feel like it's tough to breathe sometimes, like their throat feels tight. They might have some stomach issues. So anxiety can really affect the physical body and physical symptoms. Some of the psychological symptoms are excessive worry. Um, Again, feeling irritable. So people who are kind of always on edge, feeling like they're worried about things, it can come off as them being seeming irritable or seeming grumpy or upset. But really it's kind of that inner, they're worrying about things. So there's a lot of stuff going on within their bodies that can relate to that and kind of lead to that irritability. Some of the behavioral symptoms that these are tend to be a little more visible to others. So someone seeming like they're avoiding situations or avoiding people. And this might be because of anxiety, because they're worried about things going wrong or they're worried about how they're being perceived. So we really see a lot of that avoidance behavior. We might see someone with phobias. So, phobias are really just being very scared of and avoiding certain things. So someone might have a phobia of bugs, or they might have a phobia of flying or, kind of going in crowds. That's pretty common. So again, anxiety can also happen with depression. Usually they will go side by side, so it can be kind of tough to tease out the symptoms and figure out what's with what. But these are kind of some things that you can look out for. So when we're thinking about mental health and well-being, we look at it as on a spectrum. So we look at it when people are doing well, maybe they're having a bad day here and there, they experience stress, but overall, they're doing pretty well. So symptoms aren't coming up and they're not impacting the person's daily life. And the other side to that is when someone is really not doing well. So symptoms show up, they stick around, and people can kind of let that spiral, and that might turn into them being really unwell and needing a lot more help. And then we get into the recovery phase. So kind of look at it on that spectrum. And this is just a really general kind of way of putting it. But again, we look at where people are at on that spectrum. So, in looking at the different phases of treatment and how we address mental health, we look at it through prevention, which is kind of the first stop. So, this is where we're doing things like this, where we're, you know, putting awareness out there about mental health disorders and different symptoms. We're trying to break that stigma so that it becomes more normalized for people to talk about. You can even look at like drug programs in school, like DARE, that kind of thing. And also looking at stress management courses. Um, Early intervention is where, so if someone is having symptoms and people are noticing it or they're just not feeling right, this is the phase where we really kind of try to stop things where they are. So we stop them from getting worse. So if they're coming in for depression or anxiety, we might try to treat that in different ways and just kind of make sure that it doesn't get worse and that we can actually work towards recovery. And so treatment can look like a bunch of different things. There's inpatient, outpatient treatment. It really depends on what you're going through, what a person is going through, and what their symptoms are. So grounding skills kind of goes along with mindfulness, where this is a skill that I teach clients pretty much on a daily basis. It's a really useful skill for any kind of symptom or disorder that someone's experiencing. So we call this the five senses exercise, and the goal is to really get someone out of their head. So if they're feeling low, if they're not feeling great, and kind of having some of those more depression symptoms, or if they're feeling really anxious and their mood is kind of elevated, they're having trouble calming down. The goal is really to get people out of their head